All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Jay Brown. I want to welcome you to Yoga Talks podcast. Thank you for taking some time to give us a listen. I really appreciate it. Today's talk is with Anneke Lucas from Liberation Prison Yoga. And I want to warn you, it's a very intense talk. Perhaps the most intense I've ever had. Part of the reason is just Anneke's story, which is incredibly powerful and almost unbelievable, as you'll hear. I was really surprised. I mean, I didn't know a lot about her, and I had heard some things, and she really opened up and gave a lot of intimate details about very traumatic things that happened to her. And another reason why it was so intense is that I personally was in a very fragile state when we recorded. For one, I was in a lot of pain, which those of you who've been listening to the podcast recently know that I've been having this problem with pain, and I've been sharing with you about that. Maybe I should just take a quick moment to give you an update there. I just want to let everybody know that I am continuing to get better. I have less pain this week than I did last week. I still have the pain, but it is, as I said, moving in a good track. The one thing I want to say is that it does relate to the talk I had with Neil Pearson, if you guys listen to that. I have clearly noticed that there is a relationship between my pain level and when my pain's going down and the way my mind is thinking about things. You know, I shared with you guys that there's all this uncertainty about what's going to happen with the center when the lease goes up in a year and a half, and whether or not I'm going to have to move my family to a new apartment. And when I had a lot of pain and I was thinking about these things, it felt like things were going to fall, like were falling apart. And I felt overwhelmed by that. But as my pain level has lessened, my thinking has also shifted or changed, where actually in the last few days I was sort of thinking about it as how exciting it might be. Like, yes, it might be terrible if what's been going so good didn't continue to go like it has been, but who knows? Making something new or fresh or starting, that could be awesome. Like, in fact, it could be better. I could be in a better situation. And actually, in my 40s, I'm so much more equipped to do it than I was like in my 20s when I did it the first time. So what am I so worried about? It's amazing how you can make that little switch in your mind. And it definitely correlated with my pain level. Now, I can't say whether the pain level going down is what made my mind go in that direction, or if getting my mind to go in that direction made the pain level go down. I don't even know if that's causal. It's just, it's related is all I'm saying. So for whatever it's worth, those of you who have some pain stuff that you send out to me, you know, sometimes I think there's, you know, physiological things, as Neil said, that we can see and that we can work with, but a lot of times it's big picture stuff, my friends. It's big picture stuff and how that's being expressed in us. So, in any case, my pain is doing much better now, but when we recorded this talk, it was not good. In fact, it was, I think, 2 days after the initial kaplunk on my system where I couldn't even get out of bed. And I was supposed to go to Anneke's house. I was supposed to go to her place. And I emailed her and told her I couldn't come, that I couldn't travel. And she offered back that she would come to my place if I was up to it. And I accepted, which might have not been a great idea because I did have a lot of pain, but I didn't want to miss the appointment, and I really wanted to talk to her. So I said, sure, come over. And so she came over. But before she came over, I watched this video that she sent me, which talked a little bit about her story, and I'm not going to tell you that because she's going to tell it in the talk, but there's one detail that I learned in this video before she came, which was that all of these horrible things that happened to her started for her at the age of 6. And it just so happens that my eldest daughter right now is 6 years old. And so I had watched this about her and thought about the fact that this started for her right when she was the same age as my daughter. And it really, in my pain state, I kind of broke down like 30 minutes before she got there. And then I managed to like get myself together, and then she arrived, and then she came in and we recorded in my daughter's room. That was the best room for us to do it in. So literally we start this recording and I'm sitting in my daughter's room and this woman's in front of me, and I know that this all happened when she was 6. And I don't know, when we start, I'm already kind of in a very raw state. So just to know that, and I do think I kind of settle in with her, especially because she is so personal and open with me, which is really special. So for whatever it's worth, I was in a lot of pain and in a very raw state, and she was very open. So you get to hear and hopefully feel it all. Now, there is a few things I want to say, because we mention a panel discussion that she was part of for Yoga City NYC on abuse of power that happens. And when we recorded this, the video of that panel discussion had not been released. And I think that there may be a reference or two that's slightly inaccurate. So just to know that, I'm going to attach a link in the description to the video, and I recommend that you watch it. There is a video of the panel discussion that she was part of that we talk about. So you can watch that, and if there are any discrepancies, we apologize. I don't know, we might have had some slips of tongue. But I do want to say that the issue of abuse of power, and we talk about the Jivamukti thing, and just in case if you didn't know, there was this huge court case, but it has been settled out of court. I do believe that Matthew Remsky's posting a third article about it. You can find that. But in this discussion, we agree, but there are it's not such a black and white issue, you know? And so since this talk, Anneke and I have actually had several email back and forth. And, you know, she challenged me on some things that I said, and I challenged her on some things. And in a way, it's been wonderful. In fact, I consider Anneke my friend. Anytime somebody really challenges me to be a better person, that's a friend that I hold very dear. And we've just had such a wonderful exchange on a very difficult issue. I really appreciate the fierceness of her message. And I think we should probably get to that message. Before we do, I just want to thank everybody who made those donations. Some of you heard me mentioning that there's now a donate button on my website, on any blog or podcast page, and a couple people made donations. And I'm touched every time. So thank you. If you want to show some financial support directly, you can hit a donate button. Also, we put out this new excerpt from my online workshop, Gentle is the New Advanced. I don't know if you saw it. It was on Chaturanga, where I share a little nugget from the course about my feelings about Chaturanga and the way sometimes it is referred to as the shoulder shredder. So if you haven't seen that, you might see that. And we are offering a promo attached to this podcast. This is exclusive promo codes that we put out on the podcast. If you go to jbrownyogavideo.com and use promo code Anneke10, ANNEKE, number 10, Anneke10, you can get 10% off any of the practice video or the online workshop that is featured in that excerpt. So you can check that out. Lastly, next week, I've got Bernie Clark coming on to talk about yin yoga. I don't know about you guys. I didn't really know what yin yoga was. I mean, I kind of had an idea, but there's lots of confusing information out there. A lot of people teaching yin yoga, but not everybody's seeming to really know what it is. Well, Bernie does, and he's going to tell us next week, so you can listen into that. But today, we're talking to Anneke Lucas. So let's do that. Let's talk to Anneke. Listen to the particular kind of music.
Exactly.
They have the Kids Bop Kids versions. I don't know if you know about that. Well, your kid's already older now.
Yeah, I know. So I missed out on a lot of stuff.
Well, Anneke, thank you so much for coming over. I really appreciate it. As I told you, I'm not doing so great in the moment, and it's pretty ironic. You know, I got a podcast going out tomorrow, and the intro was recorded the night before this situation happened, and I knew it. I knew that I pushed it, and I was gonna, but I didn't know how bad it was gonna be.
Oh.
But the really great thing is that all the podcasts recently have been over the phone, and my whole intent originally was to be in the same room so I could look somebody in the eye. So thank you for making the trip out here and letting me see you.
Well, as I said, I really don't want to work.
Yeah, that's right. You just got back from
work.
a retreat. You said, where do you like to go on retreat?
Well, I'm in SRF, which is Self-Realization Fellowship.
Okay.
So we had a retreat at the Garrison Institute on the Hudson.
I see.
And my room overlooked the water. And it was a silent retreat.
Oh, wow.
So 2 days, meditation classes, and then
no talking.
by the monks, and no talking. And it's
that sounds like a heavenly time. No talking. I need no talking.
It was a joy.
Well, I think before we really get into a conversation,
yes.
I just have to something we have to talk about first because.
Okay, go ahead. I'm ready.
No, just because. Your name, the reason why you're sitting with me is your name came up a couple of times. First, I want to give a shout out to a guy named Zeke.
Yes.
Zeke listened to the podcast, and he came up to me after a workshop, and he said, I love your podcast. There's this woman named Anneke Lucas. You really got to get her on the podcast. And he said something about your personal story, and then he said that you taught in prisons. And I thought, oh, that's really interesting, but didn't think that much about it. And then your name came up again. I know some people who teach through Liberation Prison Yoga.
Okay.
Some teachers. We have some friends in
I
common.
must definitely know them, yeah.
Yeah. And then your name came up again because you were in that panel recently.
Yes.
With Yoga City and the abuse of power thing.
Yes.
And the scandal that was recently played out, which is now settled. I don't know if you heard that.
No.
That case has been settled.
No.
Out of court. And non-disclosed, so we won't get to know
exactly.
the
Too
details.
Bad. Yeah.
We'll get to that later, maybe. But then I thought, oh wow, her name's come up 4 times. She seems great. Let me talk to her. So we scheduled time, and I still didn't know that much about you, honestly. And then you sent me that video of you and something about your story and the work that you're doing, and I watched it this morning with my wife, and I just. I've been kind of broken up about stuff ever since I saw it because, we're sitting here in my daughter's room and she's 6. Mm-hmm. And that's the age that you were when stuff started to happen to you that was not good. And I don't know. I don't think the listeners of the podcast might not know your story. And is it okay for us to talk about it? Are you okay
Absolutely.
to talk about it?
Yes, I have been talking about it. I started talking about it a few years ago.
Okay.
I actually was abused before that.
Okay.
My mother was not really a safe person at all, so she was abusive from the start.
I see.
And so the selling me into this pedophile network was something that was available to her, and since she didn't have any boundaries, I guess this is something that she then proactively took a part in.
So from an early age, you were a way for her to make money.
Yes.
And there was a particular story that you told that was really the one that made it so heavy. And you were talking about one night, and you were in this room, and there were men coming in, and you kept thinking something.
I thought that the whole time I was being exposed to this. So I was in that network. It was a murderous network. So I was exposed to very, very dark things.
Yeah.
And children did get killed because the people involved, the perpetrators there, are politicians and VIPs.
Wow.
And aristocrats. Together, sort of banded together, and have this. It was an international network. It wasn't just in Belgium, but I certainly was abused in Belgium. And one of the major people there, who was the boss, was a renowned politician at the time. He was a cabinet minister at the time and was prime minister several times.
And has that changed now? Is that network still in place?
Yes, the Dutroux case was the case, I believe, that was meant to change it, and nothing came of it.
So it's still happening the same?
Probably.
Wow. Well, the comment that you made was that you kept wondering when you were this young child, and at some point, wouldn't someone come in and say, this is just a child, and have a conscience about it?
Yes, I was very aware that I was a child, even though I wasn't treated like a child.
Yeah.
You know, I think that in order to dehumanize, or in order to abuse anyone, you have to dehumanize them first. And so I was never really looked at as a child, and all those projections that I was carrying, attuning myself with those men to survive, I was carrying, in the meantime, the shameful things that they weren't able to carry themselves, which was either dirty or whore or, whatever it was. Sometimes it was flirty, whatever they need, and then it switched to evil. Whatever it was that I needed to carry, I was sort of playfully carrying it. But at the same time, there was one place where I was taken, and that was throughout the 6 year, sometimes in a villa, mansion that was empty, and there was just a little room in the ground floor, and I just with a dirty mattress, and I was just kept there all night. And so it was a different situation. In other circumstances, I was usually taken to orgies, and this was just in a room where men just came, and I always thought that the next man is going to come in and see a child and say, I can't do this.
And that didn't happen.
No. There were many men, and there were, in my healing process, I realized I was raped by probably around 200 men that came, some first time, but all of them drunk. I should say that. Everyone was intoxicated. So most of these people would not call themselves pedophile, right? Because that's those dirty guys that just like children. So most of these people were thinking in their mind maybe that they were expanding their limits, sexuality, and freedom mostly. I just heard this quote this weekend, actually, that when the devil landed in hell, he said, "Here at last we shall be free." And it really reminded me very much of the network, where people felt that they were finally free to do whatever.
Harm to other people.
Harm at whatever they wanted to do. And there was always the idea, the false idea of liberation is in there.
Well, how did that end? How did you get out of that?
I was rescued very dramatically by someone on the inside. I was actually had been abused very badly by that person because he had singled me out at first and then protected me for a while and then sort of put all the abuse that he had suffered onto me, the physical violence, the betrayals. He repeated everything onto me, and I made myself vulnerable. He wanted my soul, and he was only 20, so he was very young, and certainly much better looking than the most men, and I was 10. And so he was both a parental figure and at the same time a first crush.
So you were 10 and he was 20.
Yes. And when the year was done, he was done with me, and I was going to be killed. And I was tortured. And just as that begun, he had a change of heart. And so I didn't know this, but while I was...
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's...
Why tortured? Why not just killed?
I was tortured by one middleman and 5 children who were being indoctrinated.
Like a training device or something?
Yes. We were made to commit harm as a way to keep us silent. Very effective.
They do that with children, like in the countries when they get children to fight in armies and stuff.
Yes.
It's part of like a brainwashing process, I guess,
yes.
right?
Yes. In fact, there was one American who sometimes was at the orgies, and there were also some expats from the Belgian colonies in Africa who, when they reigned there, they were certainly used to torturing. And it was all about power. I was all about measuring people's power. And so I knew they were not respected, but they were nevertheless tolerated. And the American, too, there was something, he wasn't very well respected. And I felt that they were there for the information that they had. So the psychology of torture, I guess. And then I was definitely exposed to certain rituals where I was also made to commit violence.
So you said there was a year and then you were tortured to be killed, but then you weren't killed.
Yes, while this happened, he apparently negotiated for my life.
He had second thoughts.
Yes. I defied him, and that for whatever reason, was the first thing that attached him to me in the beginning of the year, and defied him again when I was going to be killed. And it was a very soul-to-soul experience. I kind of left my body. I didn't feel what was happening. And I could see he was touched, but then I didn't know. And so he agreed to go to work for the politician who was the boss for my life.
He made a deal.
He made a deal.
For your life. And so what happens after that?
Well,
you don't go back to your mom.
Yes, well, he did return me to my mother with some pills and a lot of advice. And the first one was to get out of that home as soon as possible. So I left when I was 14.
So it started when you were 6, and then you were leaving when you're 14.
I left my parents' house, yeah.
And so you're in Belgium and you're 14, and you just spent these years being tortured and exposed to this horrible network. And
I had a lot of very specific advice from this person about prostitution, about drugs, about drinking.
Like how to do it or how not to do it?
How not to do it.
Yeah.
So I actually did work in the Red District when I was 16.
Yeah.
But because of the advice, I never slept with anyone.
I see.
And so I got out. It was not very useful.
You were already trained.
Yeah. it came naturally. I was naturally drawn to it. And he also told me to leave the country.
Yeah.
So I did that when I was 18.
So you eventually did leave that and leave the country, and where did you go?
Well, he told me to go to Paris, London, New York. So I actually went and lived in all three cities.
I see. And what did you do? Where did you go first? Paris, London, in that order?
I went to the south of France first, which was the place where I had wanted to escape. Then I went to London first. Then I lived in Paris, and then I moved to New York, and that's where he wanted me to live. And then also gave very specific instructions about whom I should marry.
So did he give you money? How did you pay for any of this? What were you doing when you were in these places?
I just went. And then I found work. I was very good at getting jobs because I could attract men, and they liked me, and they would give me the job, and then I'd get fired because I'd be no good at the job and no good at holding on to it. Because
for a while, they'd give you the job until they found out you didn't know how to do it.
That's right.
And a couple times you just keep referencing these instructions. It sounds like you were following his instructions during that time. Were you?
Very much. I mean, I'm in New York because of them. Everything that I married the person very much, the only person I ever met that
fit the description. Wait, let's maybe we just jumped ahead. So you go to these different places, and how long do you spend in these different places before you land in New York?
I spent 1 year in London, 2 years in Paris, and then I came to New York.
And in those other places, did you ever do any yoga? When does yoga come into play?
That started in Los Angeles.
Which was after you came to New York?
Yes.
All right, so you get to New York, you land in New York, and you decide to stay here?
Yes, one thing that was not part of the instructions was education. I left when I was in middle school because I had to make a living. So I always was very interested in education, and I ended up being accepted at American Film Institute as a writer.
Okay.
Based on my work.
Wow. And so when did you start writing?
That was always a part of my healing. I started going to therapy. I always wrote. I wrote when I first came to New York. I went to Stella Adler because I thought it'd be nice to take...
See, I went to Playwrights Horizons Theater School, so I kind of know acting world a little bit. I did Stanislavski work for a while, and then I got out of that and moved to Grotowski and rolled around on the floor,
I love that book, Michael Grotowski.
Yeah. Okay, so that's interesting. So New York's a place to be if that's an area of study for you, right?
Yeah, and it was also, I thought it would really help me with my English.
Oh, to
learn Shakespeare with Stella Adler.
So you did that.
I did.
You went to Stella Adler. Did you graduate?
Well, I just went to the school as a student, so it wasn't through the Tisch program.
Gotcha. Okay, so and that stuff you did at Stella Adler, did that lead to anything else in terms of writing work?
I started writing right there. Yeah. I started writing plays, and then we started doing one of the plays that I wrote at Stella Adler with some people there. And we never performed it. I don't remember what happened, but it was fun working on it.
Okay, so at this time in your life, now you're in New York and you're leading a somewhat normal life, I guess, making plays at Stella Adler, and that's only years after this whole other thing happened. And do people know that about you? Is that something?
No. That was one of the instructions, absolutely, to never speak about this.
Never tell anybody.
To forget that it ever happened, forget all the names. That's why I have such a hard time remembering names today.
But I have trouble remembering names, but wow. So, okay. So
I was very traumatized.
I would imagine so.
I was not at all the person you see here today.
Yeah.
I was extremely shy, but also as a young white woman, I was very well received everywhere. So that privilege really got me everywhere.
You had a white card.
Yes.
That's something I've been having to deal with a lot these days. It's really changing in the yoga world that people who talk about this and it's a conversation, and I'm hyper aware of my white male privilege these days, you know?
Yeah, I think I practice right now often because I'm in the jails and the prisons so often. I practice, when I am in just regular situations in life, I always think what it would be like if I were black, because I'm always aware, hyper aware. I'm very empathic, so it's very easy to imagine how it would be different, how certain situations would be different. But then, of course, as a woman, I am being disrespected all the time. It happened on the way over here. It just never ends. I'm in my 50s, and it just never stops. So I think that would be a great practice for men who are feminists to really try to imagine what it would be like to be a woman, because you just have no idea. We have one thing that this healing process and this coming to the heart, basically very slowly, what it's given me is this look into the insights that I received when I was healing, and the pain I grieved.
When did that start? So when did you start to not keep it a secret, or when did you go to Los Angeles and start doing yoga? We haven't even got to your yoga yet.
Oh, yes.
When does yoga come in for you? Well,
I started doing yoga after school, so in 93, but I'd already been in therapy for several years. And so I feel that the true yoga really started
long before the classes.
Yeah. In 89 when I started therapy.
Yeah.
And
you
because
started talking about it.
Not that.
Yeah.
But I started talking about certain things.
Yeah.
And I started to get this different perspective. And here's what I feel this first moment. I was very heady because, my intelligence, I got far on it, right?
You had a clear view about things that you could have easily been oblivious about. Even your sense of understanding, oh, I'm white and I'm an attractive woman, and that has a power to it. There's a certain...
Well, I didn't think of it as power, but I did see that things were easy for me, and especially coming from Paris. I'm like, oh, yeah, wow. That had not been my experience there.
Yeah, but you didn't think of that as a power.
No.
Yeah.
Not that I didn't, use it. I obviously did, but
okay, so you're doing therapy and you start to talk about stuff eventually. I mean, to me, that's always a sign. For me and my own things that I've had to reckon with, my ability to talk about them has always been kind of a sign that I'm healing from it. But
it was the feeling that was. See, there was, for anyone who's been victimized, especially as much as I had been victimized and humiliated, it was very important in my young adult years to not feel humiliated, even if I got into situations where that would reoccur again, unthinkingly. Especially anything to do with romance, I would either reject the man when they were nice to me, or it was no two ways,
Yeah.
Or I would get hit, and
physically hit or emotionally hit, or
no,
both?
I actually was always physically safe. Part of the instructions as well. Okay. So
this guy gave you very clear instructions.
Very clear, yes. So what I want to speak about is the first step in healing, when the feeling starts to come, is the acknowledgement I was abused. And that, in the yoga world, is where a lot of people haven't treaded yet. So we have this intelligence, and we have this headiness, and we have this intellect, and we have this sort of reason way of looking at things. And then we're doing yoga. We can do a lot of yoga, and we can still be completely in the head. Even as our bodies are getting stronger and more supple. But there is this moment to recognize I've been victimized. And that comes with a whole bunch of feelings. And there is this first phase of healing where you feel how you've been victimized. And I was aware at the time that I was becoming a little more stupid. Because I was
What
just...
do you mean by that? Why were you becoming more stupid?
I was not so much in my head, and I was aware of my child self having been so hurt. So I was in that place, and I started to look at the people who had hurt me and say they're bad people, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that,
So there's like a reverting of sorts.
yeah. But it's also a phase that everyone, that acknowledgement and that phase of feeling the victimization is the first step in healing. And when we look at the yoga world, a lot of people seem to be averting that first step because it puts you on vulnerable ground.
Yeah. Okay, you jumped ahead. We're going to come back to this averting of this first step because I know where that's coming from. I saw your Facebook post. But I want to get to that Facebook post because it was an important Facebook post. But I still want to hear how you got to yoga. So at some point, you said you went to Los Angeles. It wasn't in New York that you first went to a yoga class. It was in Los Angeles. So why did you go to Los Angeles? And when did you go to Los Angeles?
Well, I went to Los Angeles. Actually, that was part of the Stella Adler, not curriculum, but one of the teachers that I liked, and I was also writing with. And so he was going to do a class in Los Angeles and then stayed there. But then I did go to school at AFI and met my future husband there.
Okay.
And he was doing yoga.
So the man got the woman into the yoga rather than
Yes.
the woman dragging the boyfriend, which is
Yes.
usually the story.
Yes.
How about that?
He was doing yoga. He took me to my first class, and he also read the autobiography of a yogi, which I then read, and then we both joined SRF together.
Back then, you've been
Yeah.
there that long.
Yeah, in 93.
And what sort of yoga class did he take you to?
I went to Larchmont. On Larchmont, there's a yoga center, and I don't remember what it's called. Maybe Center for Yoga.
Okay.
And so these were, I guess, vinyasa classes.
Yeah. And what year was that? Do you remember?
Yeah, it was in 93,
Okay.
94, 95. And then Noah, forget his last name, an Ashtanga guy, had just returned from Mysore, and he was teaching Ashtanga there. Although somebody else, they did it before with a little list of what the poses were.
Yeah, the primary series written out or something.
Written out, yes. So I started doing Ashtanga, and really I think that with this extreme physical abuse, that I did need, an extreme physical practice.
See, I came to Ashtanga Vinyasa first too, and when I came to Ashtanga Vinyasa, I had a feeling that I was broken. And I had this feeling that when you have that, when you feel like you're broken or something's wrong with you, torturing your body makes a lot of sense. And I know that not everybody's torturing their body when they do Ashtanga, but like I was. And that did change for me, and I like you said you needed it at that time, and I guess I did too. I sometimes try to save people that trouble if I can, but...
No, I noticed in the rooms, having already, by the time I got to Eddie's on Broome Street, no, it was actually
so
on
that's where you landed.
Broadway.
When you came back to New York, you ended up at
When I came back to New
Eddie's
York,
place.
I went to Jivamukti.
Okay.
Was that on 2nd Avenue.
Me too. I was there. And when you were at Eddie's place on Broome, I was across the street at Allison West's place. She had the space right across the street.
And I didn't
you could
even
see
know
from
it.
the second floor. She had her spot right across the street from his. So we were practicing at the same time. How about that?
And I should say that when I was there, I always thought there's so many people here have histories of abuse and are perhaps not aware of it.
And do you think that because of what you went through, you're more hyper aware of that with others?
Because of my healing.
Yeah.
Not because of what I went through. I could have been completely oblivious of my history.
So it's the
gone to
process of
Ashtanga.
healing those wounds that make you hyper aware when you see others with those wounds or kinds of wounds.
The healing, the feeling into the pain creates awareness, increased awareness of the self. These dissociated parts are being reintegrated into the body system. And when that happens, the expansion of consciousness and the integration and at the same time expansion that happens, I was always aware that it wasn't only for my situation, for my thing that I just figured out, my little step of the way that I just came to, but that it worked as a mathematical formula.
Yeah, like a contribution that you make to the greater consciousness of everybody.
No, I wouldn't think that.
Okay.
Rather that I just was aware that if I go through this and see, I am dealing now with this particular aspect and I'm going into the pain of it, I'm feeling the pain and I'm grieving and I'm coming out of it and there's this magic happening, this integration, this growth. That growth, I realize what I learned applies not only to me, but it applies to everyone who's been in that situation. So I can see symptoms.
Yeah, there's a
very
universal thread
Yes.
that runs through for people.
And especially, people who've
been through similar experiences.
Yes.
Okay, so you're doing Ashtanga and you're hyper aware of all the people in class with you who are wounded.
Who are like me but don't know it.
Who haven't taken the first step, right? Who haven't taken
Yes.
that first step
Yes.
towards healing those wounds.
Yes. And for me, the practice was, and the practice was this, that I would get to the same place physically. It takes the same kind of life energy to get to this extreme physical posture that I was maybe put in when I was being abused.
Oh.
And so in that moment, to then be present and let myself know that I'm here and I'm safe, that was
the model. That was the precedence.
That was my healing.
So you're in the intensity of that, but you're safe.
Yes. Well, and I wasn't really, but I wasn't completely safe.
Okay, so that actually just popped into my mind something that I know about you, which is that you were injured at the hands of a big name teacher. Is that right?
I was injured by a teacher who didn't know me at all.
Yeah.
And who pulled me into Kapotasana.
Yeah.
First time I practiced.
Name?
No.
Okay.
I don't want to say the name of that, but they're not that big.
I understand. I respect that, and that's why we won't say the name. But it was a big name teacher.
It was not that. She's not that big.
Oh, okay. As I thought it was the guy.
No.
No.
I've heard many stories.
Okay.
But he only touched me once.
But wait, he didn't injure you, but he touched you.
He touched me inappropriately.
That's what I'm remembering. Okay, so he didn't injure you, but he touched you inappropriately. Can we say the name of the person who did that?
Yes, that was Pattabhi Jois.
Okay. I don't want to make someone call people's names out if they don't feel comfortable, but I do think it's significant. I'm glad you don't mind saying his name.
Well, that name is important to name because
Yeah.
that community is silent about this man's problem, or they called it the problem. But the truth is there is a legacy of misogyny and power, pride, power that is being passed along in this exclusive club that is really the same, has similar elements to the network in that it's really about power and it's really about exclusivity and it's all about respecting this man who had no respect for anyone.
And that happened to you at the Puck building, right?
Yes.
See, I know someone else who was at those Puck buildings and she got hurt.
She got hurt. Yes, a friend of mine also was injured. She had a knee injury.
Yeah.
And she he came to put her in Padmasana, and she said, "No, I have an injury," and he put her in anyway, and re-injured her and she's an acrobat. That was my friend.
Okay.
So now maybe my voice is a little louder.
No. That's funny. Just for the podcast listeners, before we started, I was like, "Oh, you can talk loud." And she's like, "Oh, I usually talk soft," but now her voice got louder. Okay, well, I think that's so important. Okay, so you go through this process of addressing your wounds. Yoga becomes part of that. You describe yoga as this place where you set this precedence, where you feel safe in a new way, which is part of that process for you of addressing trauma. And then you go to the guru of the school of yoga that you've embraced, and he puts you right back.
Well,
although you're not in the same place anymore.
No, I only went there because the studio where I practiced closed because Eddie organized the workshop.
Okay, yeah.
So I wasn't particularly interested. I felt something weird from the people that were talking about him. I just felt that they gave him too much power. That's how I felt.
You're not one for male authority figures.
Indeed. I have a problem respecting male authority figures because I've seen their darkest side. Yeah. And so I tend to have to fight my disdain for male authority figures, especially if they're older. Mm.
So what happened when that happened to you? Did you say something right then when he did it?
I didn't, only because there were 400 people in that room. Yeah. And I felt very strongly that I would make a scene. It would be a big scene. Yeah. I would not do well if I did.
Yeah. You said you would tend to be a more quiet person by nature.
I don't know if I'm quiet
or
I just speak quietly.
I see. Okay. I like the distinction. That's good for podcasts. Okay. So you didn't say anything when it happened.
I didn't say anything in that moment in public. Mm-hmm. I did, however, I got very angry. And I saw him, and one moment I remember looking at him sitting there with his with his blanket after, he's in his underwear, and then he puts his blanket on, and he's sitting there with his white blanket and, waiting for, people to come and bow to him. And I just thought, you just like those old politicians, you're just as disgusting. That's what I was thinking, right? Mm-hmm. That's
I get it.
But a few days later, I got online and just dealt with it privately.
Like you reached out to people you knew who were students of his, or?
I did, but they didn't. They listened and they acknowledged, but they didn't help. So
what are you going to do?
I went and talked to him myself.
So you went and saw him?
I went and saw him. I first asked him why he didn't respect women. He ignored that, or
Did he know who you were, that you were someone who had been in his class that he had touched, or?
He had adjusted me somewhat. It was the second year that I was doing this workshop. Yeah. He had adjusted me somewhat. I never felt anything, special from his adjusts. But
if you are hearing this message, then you're listening to the free version of J. Brown Yoga Talks. To hear the rest of our conversation, please subscribe to Podcast Premium at jbrownyoga.com/premium.